Matthew chapter 16 verse 24 says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me.'" NR. Meaning and context. In this verse, Jesus is teaching his disciples about the cost of discipleship. This statement comes after Peter's confession that Jesus is the Messiah, followed by Jesus predicting his death. It's part of a larger passage where Jesus speaks about the sacrifices involved in truly following him. Key points in the verse. 1. Whoever wants to be my disciple. Open invitation. Jesus opens the call to anyone who desires to follow him. The offer is universal, but it comes with conditions. True discipleship. Being a disciple isn't just about belief or admiration of Jesus, but about committing to live in the way he teaches. Must deny themselves. Self-denial means putting aside selfish desires, ego, and personal ambitions in favor of God's will. It's a call to let go of self-centeredness and live a life that's centered on Christ. To deny oneself is to surrender control of your life, trusting that God's plan and purpose are better than our own. Take up their cross. The cross was a symbol of suffering, shame, and ultimately death. For Jesus' audience, the idea of taking up a cross would immediately bring to mind the Roman practice of crucifixion, which was reserved for the worst criminals. This means being willing to endure hardship, persecution, and even death for the sake of following Jesus. It's about accepting the challenges and sacrifices that come with living a life of faith. Taking up the cross can also symbolize daily acts of obedience, where we continually choose to follow Jesus despite challenges, temptations, or personal difficulties. And follow me. Following Jesus means walking in his footsteps, living by his teachings, and committing to a life that reflects his example of love, humility, and sacrifice. The phrase "follow me" indicates an ongoing journey, not just a one-time decision. It requires continual dedication and growth in the Christian faith. Matthew chapter 16 verse 24 is a profound call for believers to understand the seriousness and depth of true discipleship. It's not just about belief, but about a transformed life. One where personal desires are secondary to God's will, and where suffering or sacrifice may be part of the journey. In a culture that often promotes self-fulfillment and personal ambition, Jesus' call to deny oneself can seem counterintuitive. This verse encourages believers to put God's will above their own desires, trusting that his path leads to greater fulfillment. Taking up the cross isn't about seeking suffering, but it's about accepting the hardships that come with living out a true Christian faith. It means standing firm in faith even when it's difficult or unpopular, and being willing to sacrifice for the sake of following Jesus. This verse highlights that discipleship is not a one-time event, but a daily commitment. Each day presents new challenges, opportunities, and choices to follow Jesus. It's a continual journey of growth, obedience, and transformation. Selflessness and service. The call to deny oneself and take up the cross represents the heart of Christianity. Living a life of service, humility, and love for others as Jesus did. True discipleship costs. Jesus makes it clear that following him is not easy and will require personal sacrifice. But this path, though difficult, leads to eternal life and a deeper relationship with God. Taking up your cross means making the intentional choice to forgive them, even if they haven't apologized or made things right. This doesn't mean excusing their behavior, but rather releasing the burden of resentment that holds you back. Forgiveness brings freedom and aligns your heart with Christ's example of grace. Taking up your cross means shifting your focus away from seeking approval or validation from others, and instead finding your worth and identity in God. In a society that often measures success by external accomplishments, wealth, or appearance, Jesus calls us to find our value in being loved by God. Focus on living in a way that pleases God rather than being consumed by the opinions of others. Ask yourself how your choices align with God's will, not what the world expects. Social media and modern culture encourage comparison, leading to envy or dissatisfaction. When those feelings arise, remind yourself that your value comes from God's love and purpose for your life, not from comparing yourself to others. If you feel pressure to conform to societal standards of success, whether through material possessions, career advancement, or physical appearance, taking up your cross means rejecting those pressures and instead seeking God's approval. It may involve making decisions that others don't understand but are in line with your faith and calling. Taking up your cross often means submitting to God's plan, even when it's not the path you expected or wanted. Sometimes God's direction for your life involves challenges or changes that don't make sense in the moment, but trusting His plan is part of discipleship. Regularly spend time in prayer, asking God to reveal His plan for your life. Be willing to follow His lead, even if it means letting go of your own plans. Sometimes taking up your cross involves waiting on God's timing, which can be challenging. Practice patience, trusting that God is working behind the scenes even when you can't see immediate results. If you are facing a crossroads or a difficult decision, taking up your cross might mean choosing the path that aligns with God's values and direction, even if it's the harder or less popular choice. Trusting that God's plan is greater than your own understanding is a key part of following Jesus. Taking up your cross is a continual process. It's not a one-time decision, but a daily commitment to live a life that reflects Christ. This journey involves growth, surrender, sacrifice, and transformation. Here's why it's essential. By daily surrendering your will to God and accepting the challenges of discipleship, you grow closer to Christ and deepen your faith. This process refines your character and helps you become more like Jesus. Taking up your cross shifts the focus away from self and toward God's greater purpose. It frees you from the burden of living for yourself, leading to a more meaningful and fulfilling life. Following Jesus and taking up your cross helps you keep an eternal perspective, reminding you that your life on earth is temporary and that your ultimate purpose is to live for God's kingdom. Taking up your cross means living a life of sacrifice, trust, and commitment to following Jesus no matter the cost. It involves daily surrendering your desires, enduring challenges, and choosing to walk in obedience to God's will. Though difficult at times, this path leads to true fulfillment, spiritual growth, and a deeper relationship with Christ. As you reflect on how to apply this in your own life, consider the areas where God is calling you to take up your cross. Whether it's through forgiveness, sacrifice, resisting worldly pressures, or trusting His plan. What specific actions or changes can you make today to align your life more closely with Jesus' call to discipleship?